Hey everybody, welcome back to the internet. I think we're going to be looking at some ProRevenge stories today, so strap yourselves in because we got 3 long ones. So this first story is called Bank Screws Old Lady, Lawyer Screws Bank, Old Lady Gets Millions Back. Financial advisors employed by a pretty major bank stole all the money of a wealthy old lady who was dying of Alzheimer's, and she didn't know anything until her lights were cut off. My brother was a pretty small-time lawyer and got the call to represent her. Every other big-time attorney in the area had passed on the case, or tried and failed to get anywhere. When you're up against a legal team that makes collective $10,000 an hour, it's not easy. And since banks always have the mandatory arbitration clauses worked into their contract, she couldn't sue or even do discovery. Like, it was obvious what had happened, and the only people with access to the account were clearly implicated. But A, it was hard to prove without any access to bank records, and B, under arbitration, it wouldn't matter anyway. They could be criminally prosecuted, but the bank wouldn't have to pay back the money. Did I mention the bank had, at this point, frozen the lady's access to her own account due to fraud? She couldn't even get her own bank statements. Anyways, my bro became pretty obsessed with avenging this woman. By the time he got the case, she barely even knew what her own situation was most of the time, but her son wanted to make the bank bend over, and my brother was all in. He managed to find an incredibly obscure technicality that nullified the arbitration clause, and was able to force a major bank into the discovery process. That alone was a huge enough deal that the decision was written up in many legal newspapers across the country. After fighting and delaying discovery until the very last minute, the bank dumped 200+ boxes of documents on my brother the Friday before the Monday discovery hearing. He had 72 hours to go through the tens of thousands of pages of documents. He rented himself a hotel for the weekend so he'd have no disturbances, had a friend bring a dolly and hand truck the boxes to his hotel room, and got to work. In one of the boxes was an email between a bank VP and the bank's chief lawyer, discussing how there would never be a discovery process, so there was no need to destroy documents, and also saying that they weren't worried about the little old lady's lawsuit since the bank had frozen her account, so she wouldn't be able to pay her lawyer, and he was just a small-time country lawyer who would surely quit once he wasn't being paid. It wasn't like he worked for some huge firm that could just pay his bills while he worked. They also discussed how the lady would likely die of Alzheimer's before her accounts would be unfrozen once the fraud was proven to be false. They had my bro all wrong, of course. He was working all day on paying cases, and they stayed up half the night working on this one, sometimes without getting paid anything for months. We did the math later. He made about $2.75 an hour for his work over a span of 7+ years. Anyways, these chuckleheads openly discussed several illegal acts in email to each other, and then failed to destroy the paperwork proving that they had actually undertaken those acts, which, legally, they could have destroyed at the time, but they were so arrogant they thought they didn't have to. When my brother entered into the evidence Monday morning, they immediately mentioned for a recess and offered to settle for, an undisclosed sum. He also won his client $10 million in a separate part of the lawsuit. One agent recently finished serving a long sentence in the same federal prison as Bernie Madoff. He also lost his home, the beach home he bought with the old lady's money, had his financial broker license revoked, and his wife left him. However, his kid did get a private college education paid for in cash with the lady's money, and he bought $200,000 worth of wine that was never recovered. Sadly, the lady did in fact die before the case settled, so the money went to her son into a large charitable trust that then elected my brother as the main trustee. So he gets to disperse the money he won in the settlement and see a lot of people benefit from his work. The funniest part of this revenge was that the apparent motive for the theft was not just that the agent wanted to be rich. He had accomplices, but he was the main mastermind. He specifically wanted to use the money to enhance his standings in the community. So actually, he donated a lot of the stolen money to charities so that he could be invited to huge galas and get philanthropic awards, etc. Now he's broke, unemployed, divorced, and disgraced, while my mother is going to galas and getting philanthropic awards with the money this guy helped pay for with the sale of his houses and cars, etc. So pretty sweet. ETA, I feel obliged to spread the anti-arbitration gospel of my brother. If it weren't for a fluke technicality that led to the boilerplate arbitration clause being thrown out, there would have been no discovery and no justice for this lady. Under arbitration clauses, you're not allowed to sue a bank, brokerage, financial advisor, etc., and without a lawsuit, you can't do discovery. And financial agents cannot be forced to pay you back for money they steal. even if you can prove they stole it. In this case, discovery led to evidence of tax fraud on the part of one of the agents who stole the money and didn't report the income, and the feds then gained a lot more access to the records. In conclusion, arbitration benefits the corporation 90% of the time at the consumer's expense. Opt out whenever possible. Yeah, that's kind of funny that the guy stole a bunch of money so that he could give it to charity so that he could look like a good person. That's like one of the most ironic ways you can actually steal. I mean, isn't like one of the... I think there's a lot of bookstores where the #1 most stolen book is the Bible or something like that. It's kind of funny. And on to the second story called, Try to Make My Life Hard, I'll Destroy You. So, context, I'm currently in high school, but the story starts in the 2nd grade. Anxiety, PTSD, you know the drill. The first day of 2nd grade, we all go to the school to settle in. Then our school floods, big time. The whole town is deep in water for 2 weeks. My house was fine as we live on a hill, but we had no power for 4 weeks. When we get back to the school, every kid is at least a little traumatized. All but one kid. He laughed at the kids who shared the stories, made jokes about pets who died. This was my first experience with him. Let's call him Adolf. Through the 2nd grade, he was a pretty standard bully, mean to me and my friends, but when 3rd grade came, something changed. Suddenly he was nice and friendly to everyone, except me. So when I told people how cruel he was, they wouldn't believe me because he was a little angel to them. So mid-4th grade came, and Adolf was still getting worse, openly berating me in school. Then my house burnt down, he became worse. Wow, that's quite the sentence out of nowhere. Making fun of me for everything that came with that. 5th grade he becomes violent, punching, kicking, and hitting. One day I was sitting near the basketball court with some of my friends. Adolf walked up and kicked in my left eye hard, leaving me with permanent damage and no depth perception. Doctors told me I could have lost my eye that day. 6th grade is when he took it too far. He sat at my table during lunch because all of my friends liked him. I got the flu, and he used the week I was gone to convince them all that I had bullied him. He also went in, forces tears to the principal who didn't like me anyway, and made up some story about me. When I came back, no one in the grade would talk to me, and the principal told me if he ever saw me near Adolf, I would get suspended. After a week or so, I realized no one had told these 2 nerds not to talk to me, so I befriended them. They are still my friends today. After about a month, most of my friends had come crawling back apologetic. Now we're in high school, and I decided it's finally time for revenge. I started simply about a year ago. I befriended all of his friends without him noticing. Then I befriended his sister and his mom. Once I trusted everyone he liked, I made a list, a graphic list, with dates, 6 pages long. It spanned every abuse he had committed for as long as I could remember. First I printed it and put it in his mail. He came to school with a black eye. Then I started airdropping it to everyone I could think of. No one knew it was me, except him. He remembered the things he did to me, but if he told anyone, he would have to admit it was all true. Most of his friends abandoned him, his grades dropped significantly, his girlfriend dumped him, and he got kicked off the basketball team because all the boys hated him. His life is in shambles, but he hasn't said a word to me or administration, so I have no regrets. That's an interesting way of blackmailing somebody who bullied you. And on to the final story for today, called Level 3 Crooks Get Obliterated by Level 99 Boss. Don't commit crimes you are too stupid for. So what you need to know in advance. This didn't happen to me, but to my boss. He's a district attorney in a larger city in Germany. He drives an expensive car and he has a device that signals the police where he is and that he's in danger. The participants are my boss and 5 youngsters and the police. Now to the story. One day he drove home from work, and suddenly 2 boys, 16 and 17, jumped in front of his car, forcing him to stop. My boss was really scared, thinking that they are to take revenge on him because he put many people in jail, and immediately pressed the button on his device to inform the police. The police immediately rushed with all available units, but they immediately shouted at him, accusing him of trying to kill them. The 3 other boys ran to the scene, also shouting at my boss that they are going to call the police and that he is going to lose his license. Then one of the 2 of them offers that he could give all of the money he's got with him and they would leave him alone. At that point, my boss decided to serve some spicy revenge on these a-holes. Knowing that every police officer available is rushing to the scene and he only needs to play for time, so he immediately agreed, but under one condition. They all need to sign a written agreement containing that he paid the money and they are not going to press charges / inform the police. The dumb kids agreed, so he wrote the contract and everyone signed it. After they handed the paper back, then they demanded the money, but my boss just laughed at them, stating that no one is going to believe them since he had written proof that what they had done is highly illegal and that they are going to jail. Not to mention that the police was coming. So the police came from freaking everywhere. Dang, he cannot resist a big wide smile when he's describing their faces, and I can totally understand that. They were looking like scared ghosts on the verge of existence. One of the smartest boys thought this paper needs to vanish, so this dummy decides to rip it out of my boss's hands in front of the police, as they should later realize that this was their biggest mistake. Then they tried to escape from the police, but 3 of the boys were caught. The police thought that they wouldn't get to know who boy 2 and 4 were unless one of the others snitches. Well, they didn't need to snitch because they all signed the paper with their real names. So police got the other 2 as well. Fast forward to court. Do you remember that I told you that boy 3 made a big mistake? Well, here in Germany there's a law from the Nazi era still in place that gets you a minimum sentence of 5 years when you rob a motorist. So boy 3 and 5, both above 18, got 6 years in adult prison, also because of their criminal history. Boys 1 and 2 got 3 years in juvenile detention, and boy 4 was lucky with only community service. All in all, my boss actually didn't need to do much. They destroyed their own lives, mostly on their own. Sorry my English is trash. Hope you could nevertheless enjoy the story. Don't worry, I still managed to figure out what you were trying to say. Man, that actually reminds me of Better Call Saul, the Breaking Bad lawyer guy. Yeah, there's like a whole story of him doing stuff like that all the time. Well, that's all for the stories today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if there's any specific boards you want me to read from next time. So, thanks for watching.